Warhammer 40K Battlesector is one of the closest things that you will get to actually playing the tabletop game without having to spend the ungodly amount of money and time on your own army. There are plenty of other Warhammer games, some from the Age of Sigmar era and some from the 40K era. My personal favorite from the Age of Sigmar games is the Vermintide franchise, and my personal favorite from the 40K era is actually the Warhammer Squad Command game on the PSP. I would sink countless hours into this and even enjoy the online play with my brothers. So when I say that this game rivals Squad Command, I need you to know just how much I loved that particular game. There are plenty of other Warhammer games, regardless of what era they take place in, that also use a turn-based setup, but few of them actually make you feel like you're playing the tabletop game come to life. Dawn of War and Total Warhammer do a great justice to giving you this big army feel and can even remind you of the tabletop game. But being in real time, it really kind of takes away from the feeling of lining up your shots, measuring for range, and hoping for a good dice roll. Out of these countless turn-based games, most of them are smaller squad-based engagements. Mordheim, City of the Damned, even has a unique turn-based style that reminds me of Valkyria Chronicles, where you can move your units around freely, but it takes up movement points to do so. I wish the ranged attacks were a lot more like Valkyria Chronicles, where you're actually moving the camera around and aiming instead of, hey you, shoot that one. But I digress. So even when it comes to a turn-based game, it seldom feels more like Final Fantasy Tactics or XCOM, but in the Warhammer universe. Battlesector, however, is a game that feels much more like the original tabletop game than most other games. When you move, you're not just moving a single character, you're moving an entire squad, but your hero characters can move by themselves. The Fog of War mimics your line of sight. Reaction shots, moving while engaged leaves you open for attacks, move points, action points, armor penetration. Everything really makes it feel a lot more like playing the real tabletop game. Granted, nothing will be quite like taking out the trusted ruler or rolling the dice yourself, but hopefully I've made my point. So this game has been out on the PC since July 2021, and we are currently playing and reviewing this as a console version, more specifically the PlayStation 4 version. Even more specific, the PlayStation 4 version played on my PlayStation 5. So keep that in mind when we're talking about the game throughout this review. Let's start with the visuals. The visuals are good. They don't look photorealistic by any means, but they do a great job of setting the tone and the overall aesthetic of the game. I have always loved the space gothic look of all the units, building, and the dreadnoughts. And this game does a great job at the details of each unit. You won't mistake them for the real 7 to 8 foot tall Marines with guns bigger than a normal sized human being, but what they lack of in high fidelity graphics, they make up for in the smaller details. After all, you can zoom in and get any angle you want. You can zoom in to see all the carnage of the chainsaws eviscerating your foes. And this is before even messing around with the photo mode. Now, I think I would never legitimately talk about a game's photo mode, and have rarely seen fit to even really use one more than just once. So the fact that I feel compelled to even bring it up during this review is a good thing. You can do the typical things like taking the camera to places that it wouldn't normally go, mess around with the depth of field, add in some edgy Instagram filters, and even pimp out the game's logo. But the cherry on top of the sundae, the pied de resistance, the rama-lama-lama to its dinga-da-dinga-dong, is the ability to skip frames. So normally the reason I don't really give a rat's ass about a picture mode is finding and timing an awesome shot can just be really hard, and well, I'm lazy and I forget things very easily. But with the ability to skip frames, I can order a unit to attack, wait until the first shot is fired, and then click the photo mode. Then with a tap of the circle button, go frame by frame until I find the perfect shot. This makes using the photo mode more enticing. All that to say, under heavy scrutiny and shoving the camera up a Space Marine's nether regions, everything still has a surprising amount of detail. A+ for effort. The sound is great. Nothing really to complain or comment too much on here. The pews sound booming, the slashes sound clangy, the ahs sound very ah. The voice acting is spot on, and it definitely fits the overly dramatic religious tones of the universe. So all is good there. And the music is great, with a full orchestra and a choir further adding to the gothic tone of the game. So all is good here. Not really sure if I have the technical know-how or the best experience to really comment further on this, so we're going to go ahead and move on. So let's talk about the best part of the game, which is the gameplay. You can play through the game on campaign mode, and this does a great job at keeping things fresh. One mission, you're collecting gene seeds, and the next, you are arriving and holding down a bunker for a certain amount of turns. They do a good job at keeping things varied. The only thing that is a little off is you'll finish the main objective, and then it'll just have you kill whatever enemies are remaining. So each map devolves into just wiping everyone out, making the objective diversity feel a bit artificial. There does seem to be incentive to finish quickly, because I had one match where I was down to one enemy remaining, and then all of a sudden 2 more showed up. So theoretically, if I would have been quicker, I would have ended a few turns prior. But this could also have the opposite effect, where just when you think you're done, frustration mounts as more enemies show up. Either way, this seems like an artificial way to kind of just prolong matches, whether that is the intention or not. Then you can always just play skirmish, which allows you to either do a battle on a preset map or replay missions you've played, but now with all the units and characters unlocked. This is fun because you can also use any units and there is no limit. Normally, each unit and squad have a point value and you would have to adhere to a very strict limit. But here is the second mission that would normally only let you use about 600 or 700, I'm not quite sure. This time I'm using a 3,000 point army. There is an unintentional annoyance, and that is during the replay campaign mission menu, it gives you the option to switch factions to the Tyranids, making me think to myself, well, that's fun. I can now replay the missions, but from the bad guy's perspective. Only unfortunately, it doesn't actually allow you to do this, coming up with a screen saying wrong faction selected for this mission, which makes me wonder, well, then why are you even letting me choose? But regardless, even on non-mission skirmishes, you can set up in a multitude of ways and choose your own adventure, sort of. You can choose the map, objective, turn limit, no limit, what faction you want to play as, what the AI will play as, choose from a preset army or construct your own. You can choose the army size, and then you can change everything about the enemy as well. This really gives you the freedom to set up some really cool scenarios. Then there's the multiplayer. At the time of recording this, I'm able to do the hot seat, which is basically just 2 people using the same system, and I couldn't really play online because nobody seems to be online. And another maybe slight annoyance is when you're playing hot seat, which is just playing on one console, you have to have 2 controllers. Normally I wouldn't care about that because it is, after all, 2 people playing the game, but it's 2 people playing a game and taking turns, and you can both see the screen, so why can't you just allow me to pass the controller to the person when it's their turn? It's a little confusing, and I think maybe it would just be something nice to add later on down the road, and maybe that's just a silly old console peasant talking. Then we get into the actual controls of the game. So the cursor is always at the center of the screen and you move around with the analog sticks. You can zoom in and out with L2 and R2, and you select things with X, and you press square if you want to do certain abilities. This works really, really well. The sensitivity might be a little bit high and may take a little bit of getting used to, but other than that, it works really well. A lot better than some of the other like RTS games that can be a little bit more frustrating to control. At the beginning of each match, you'll be able to pick how your army is set up and what position they are in. And each of the turns consist of you moving each of your units once. As I mentioned before, the fog of war that you would normally get in an RTS, in this it's more of a line of sight. It will move around based on what type of unit it is and what direction they're facing. Objects and land masses will obstruct it, leaving room for strategic repositioning. Unlike most RTSs, where there's just a magic circle that clears the sky for you and you have a bird's eye view of everything regardless of your units in relation to the enemies, in this one, position and orientation to your enemy actually matter. There are bound to be moments where an enemy shows up and you just didn't know they were there because you had your back turned. This does a great job at encouraging you to be more aware of your surroundings. Then it's time to attack. What are you attacking? Who are you attacking with? Do you use a special ability now or later? Do they have armor? What are your unit's armor-piercing capability? Who came up with the sounds of the animals? Like who decided that a dog says woof and a cat says meow? While we're on the subject, who decided the difference between an oink and a snort? I think I got off topic. Point is that this is where the strategy comes into your turn-based strategy game. Sure, this guy could attack that guy, but this guy does better damage with his power fist, so maybe use him. The depth of the strategy and the amounts of stats you have at your disposal are staggering and make the game feel really fleshed out and full of possibilities. Then there are the attacks themselves, which always feel meaty and like they have a lot of weight to them. And that's not just because you're controlling behemoths of men in giant armor and vehicles, but the way the animations play out, the way the Tyranids react to getting shot, slashed, or exploded. My only negative here, and that certainly goes in quotes, but I would have to say that I would like to see more giblets. You're fighting Tyranids, which are essentially giant bugs, so it would have been nice to have a more dynamic dismemberment when defeating them. Even with grenades or tanks, they sort of just have a bunch of blood splash out of them and then they kind of just fall over. Same thing with a Tyranid attacking a Marine. Some of the units have claws made out of these giant blades bigger than the Marine itself. And yet, when a Marine is killed, it's just a little bit of blood and a dramatic fall to the ground. I don't need body parts flying everywhere. I don't need intestines flopping down on the ground. I'm not a masochist. I'm a sadist. But just an appropriate reaction to having a tank shove a shell directly into your body would have been nice. But this doesn't necessarily take away from the experience or even detract from the amount of fun that you're having. It's just my nitpicky observation of the review. Okay, I lied. There is actually another nitpicky thing that I need to bring up. I play on the PlayStation. The PlayStation has a touchpad, which for all intents and purposes is a mouse pad. Why are no strategy games or RTS games, why do they not let you use the touchpad as a mouse pad? Then there's this. This game is called Outriders. It is a third-person cover shooter, looter shooter, and look what it lets you do. Some random third-person looter shooter lets you use the touchpad as a mouse pad, and you can actually click things, but an RTS or a strategy game doesn't. Developers need to utilize the touchpad more, but I get it. It's hard. Anyways, at the end of the day, if you are a fan of Warhammer, I could confidently say to you that you will enjoy this. The world, the lore, the units, and the advanced technology and the tactics are all make it feel great and worth a try if you have even just a little bit of a soft spot for Warhammer 40K. I'd even go as far to say that if you just enjoy turn-based games, this would still be worth it for you. The attachment to the universe helps, but even if you just see this as a turn-based Starship Troopers, I'd wager that you'd really enjoy yourself regardless. It is currently $39.99, which is a great price. And if it had a more mainstream IP attached to it, I could see this game being a full price $60 game. So I'd say it's definitely worth the investment if you like strategy games, and definitely worth a day one purchase. All right, guys, so that was my thoughts on Warhammer Battlesector. You know, one last main thing, I hope this game does good enough where either we get a sequel or DLC, because another quote-unquote negative, it's not really negative, but one quote-unquote negative is that you only get to play as Marines or Tyranids. It would be nice to play as, you know, the Dark Eldars, the Eldars, you know, play as Orcs, play as Chaos Marines. So I really hope that this game does well enough. You know, it's an unknown studio, or at least a very smaller studio. So I hope this does good enough where we either get the DLC or number 2 has 4 factions instead of just the 2. Because while I love the factions and I had a real fun time with it, it just would have been nice to have more diversity. So that's what I thought about it. You know, definitely think that it's worth a try. But if you have tried it, let me know. If you haven't tried it, what is your favorite turn-based Warhammer game? Let me know down in the comments below. Make sure, please, like, share, subscribe, and all the good stuff. It really helps out. We're still a smaller channel, so anytime we get some feedback is always very much appreciated. All right, so I was Nick. Thank you so much for joining us on ThreatX3 Productions, and you have yourself a good day.